Serbia beat Germany in the bronze medal game. Wes, I wanted to know, did anything else about the final standings surprise you about this tournament?
I think honestly, the way Serbia started the tournament versus how they ended surprised me. Where they looked, the German coach said they were the second, they were the best team they played. They didn't play the US. They said they were better than France. They started the tournament a little rocky. I was a bit worried if they were even gonna medal. But the way they started flowing on offense, started running things through Jokic, which is normally a good idea. Avramovic was really great on both ends of the floor. Bogey getting back. I think he wasn't fully healthy to start the tournament.
Mhm.
That might have surprised me just how good they got. Like their medaling wasn't a surprise, obviously, when you've got Jokic, but when they started the tournament, it was a little rocky. They looked a little shaky. So for them to level it up so much to the point where they could have come away with a gold if a few things go differently, that's probably what I'd say was the biggest surprise to me.
I wonder if there's any question now that Serbia is the second best team in the Olympics based on how it
Mm,
went. I mean, they didn't win the silver. It's just how the structure of the tournament
yeah.
works. They definitely, I guess, they put up a better fight just based on the how the game went. USA was down in the semifinal against Serbia, and France was more competitive than I thought they'd be today. But yeah, against Australia specifically in the quarterfinal, Serbia was down by what was it, 24? Was that the yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's right. They were down 24 at some point in the second quarter, I believe.
so it was like,
Yeah.
yeah, like you were saying, they were like close to maybe not even medaling, which would have been pretty bad. We talked last episode about, the chances of Serbia not getting a medal and you have Jokic on your team. When it was all said and done, Team Serbia really impressed and looked like a whole
For
total
sure.
team and everyone contributed. And we'll talk about that. But I really liked following you during the Australia and Serbia game just because, you have connections all over the place with that game. You were even, maybe you were like, I'm sad for my home country, but I'm still can enjoy Jokic to be happy for him. Kind of funny that that became a topic later on. But what were your
Yeah.
thoughts about the Australia Serbia game?
Well, there's no way you're from like Josh Giddey or Dyson Daniels. They didn't quite tweet me after the game, so that was good.
Yeah.
But I said it. It was I think I said it's like sure there'll be 100 Australian teams that I'll get to watch, and I wasn't actively cheering for Serbia or actively cheering against, but you're only going to get to see Jokic in the prime of his career at the Olympics once. By the next Olympics, he'll be 33 or whatever, so he'll still be good, but it's pretty much a once off. So
Yeah.
I wasn't unhappy that they won. I'll just say that. I wasn't actively just rooting against Australia, but I wasn't devastated.
A lot of people were saying that similar sentiment of just like rooting for good basketball, but you do bring up a good point where when you have these generational players, and now these players are all over the world. It's not just Michael Jordan at the Olympics. Everyone wants to
Mm,
watch him. Granted, there was international players back then too. That was interesting to watch. The game was growing from a global standpoint with Michael Jordan and stuff. And now the game is big. I hope what fans would understand that Jokic is a generational player too, and lots of different people are going to want to watch him. It's not just Serbians. You'd think people would get that, but
yeah.
anyway,
I wanted to ask Wes what he thought Australia's biggest problem was,
Yeah.
particularly in the second half of that game, or even it started in the second quarter, right? Because Serbia was able to cut the lead way down going into the half. Because the way that the game started off was exactly what I sort of predicted would be Serbia's issues trying to guard Australia's offense in particular. Like there was no defense being
No,
played. The
not at all.
transition game was just not there. So I was wondering what did Serbia change?
I think it's the same thing that's been the problem for pretty much like the whole time I've watched Australia is when Paddy Mills isn't absolutely on flames, which he was for the first half, and he has been pretty much his entire his Olympic and World Cup numbers are just absurd. But we don't have that outside shot making. Josh Giddey's decent at getting to the basket and stuff. Dyson Daniels the same. They're all the same kind of players. Dante Exum, Josh Green didn't even play any minutes. I don't think. It's we had a guy called Jack McVeigh from the NBL who was knocking down some shots, but there's no real creation. That's where Joe Ingles used to be good. So that's where we've struggled. And that's where I'm wondering where we're actually going to get that from because Patty Mills will have to retire eventually. So I think once
Oh
that
yeah,
dried up, that was seemed to be what happened. And then Serbia
yeah.
just had that consistent offense with Jokic where they can
yeah.
always go back to that.
Yeah, Dellavedova was getting minutes over Josh Green in that game.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what you have to say about that.
I mean, Josh Green was
Answer
bad.
for
I'll
your
be honest
team, Wes.
with you, but
That's true.
like I'm a
That is
fan of
true.
Josh Green, but yeah, I don't think he scored a point the whole tournament, which is
Oh,
absurd.
really?
Yeah, or a
I felt
field
like
goal.
it was an interesting game for sure because I was literally watching it like, oh, okay, I guess Serbia is just like DOA, and now they're gonna try to like slowly and methodically work their way back and try to make a comeback. I was really frustrated for the most part, but then like you said, they really caught their rhythm, particularly offensively, and we saw that in their semifinal game versus the United States, right? Will, how did you feel watching Serbia go, up so big versus the United States? Because what happened in this game was basically the flip of what happened versus Australia, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was really excited, but I was trying not to celebrate too early. It's Team USA. I was just waiting for like what is going to be the story of this game to develop where USA is going to get back in it. I knew they were. Steph was really frustrating me as someone who was pulling for Jokic just because the 3-point shot is a shot where that Serbia kind of had struggled with a little bit in this tournament. It wasn't like their calling card, so to say. They had it in them for sure. And when you play with Jokic, you're going to get good looks from there. So I'm like, oh, well, they're killing it from three in this game. They're on fire. And then Steph was just matching them. So they got a big, they had won every quarter. They won the first 3 quarters. And then the fourth, just they only scored 15 points. But, Steph was able to keep them in it. And the fourth, it just got away from them. And man, they just needed a couple things to go their way. It just wasn't quite there. You were skeptical the whole time. You're like, I feel like USA is going to win this just because, you are a
Will is
smart
literally
basketball
texting me.
fan.
He's like, oh my God. And I'm like, no, don't even
No,
talk to me
yeah,
right now. Like,
that
I'm not,
inevitable feeling as well.
I will believe it when I see it, all of that. By the end of that game, despite everything that I was saying, I felt like that was Serbia's game to lose at the end and that they gave it away. And there are specific criticisms that I have of how the rotations in the fourth quarter were handled, where Alexa Avramovic doesn't come in until there are 3 minutes left in the game and the lead is gone. Jokic, I think he played basically the entire fourth quarter,
Yeah.
but it wasn't until again that 3 minute mark that he was playing at the 5 because Pesic insisted on playing Milutinov 7 minutes of the fourth quarter with
Yeah.
Jokic, like next to Jokic. And it was a mess on both ends of the floor. And at that point, I was actually thinking like they have a big enough lead that if they can hang on here, like I know US is going to make a run, but if they can hang on here and keep their flow going, they should be fine. But that double big look that I complained about the entire tournament just completely destroyed any chance that they would have had of hanging on to that lead. USA was like, we're gonna put LeBron on Jokic and then have like Embiid or AD roaming off of Milutinov, who like can't finish in the paint and whatever. I actually thought he was fine in that game when he was on the floor by himself at the
Yeah.
at the 5 spot. Everyone on the team was playing really hard. This is not a rant about Jokic not having enough help because like Will said, like a lot of guys stepped up really big, hit some big shots in that game. They were defending as well as they could, but I do think that the offensive spacing of the double big lineup and defensively what it meant for how Team USA was able to attack them down the stretch of that game just killed it and destroyed, any possibility of what would have been a major upset in this tournament.
Yeah, I'd agree on the double big. The problem with Milutinov was, well, Jokic's dump passes that he loves to do. When you have that roaming big, the way to counter it is if he can't shoot, you dump it off in the paint when the big comes over, which he made like 3 of those passes, and I don't think he converted on any of
He
them.
couldn't make a layup.
I know he couldn't catch or make the layup. Like if you're that big and if you're gonna be sacrificing the perimeter shooting, the perimeter defense, and making Jokic's job harder to score,
Exactly.
you got to at least be able to finish layups. But that was frustrating.
There was one play in the fourth quarter, and there were a couple of these throughout the tournament whenever they went to this look where, a lot of people pointed out like Jokic did miss all of his threes in that fourth quarter, but why is he out on the perimeter? Because Milutinov is clogging up the paint. And when he gets like a touch pass from Jokic and Jokic relocates out to behind the arc, and Milutinov has like a semi-contested layup that he passes up in favor of kicking out to Jokic for 3. And I'm just like, what am I watching right now? There were also possessions where, USA is on a run, they call a timeout, they come out of the timeout, and what's the play? A Petrushev post up?
Yeah.
What are we doing, people?
He
Like,
was creating
I was
no
just like,
ground.
this team isn't serious. And it was like crazy because they just went away from what was working for most of that
Mm.
game.
Well, like USA has bigs, like elite big in spades. They have AD and Bam. Even if you are a pretty good finisher normally, like Milutinov, and you're a big guy. I mean, I saw all Olympics him kind of struggling and guys swiping at him in the post and like either turning it over or just not finishing straight up. Not to like, shit talk him,
I'm gonna
but
be honest,
you
I was
know,
just surprised anytime he made a layup. Like, I was just shocked.
Yeah.
I never expected it to happen. It's not shit talk. It's like specifically in those minutes when Jokic is on the floor too, because the paint is also clogged for him,
Yeah.
right?
yeah,
So I
right.
thought it was just like
He did
not
rebound all right. I'll
setting
give him
those
that.
guys
That's
up.
like the one thing you got to do is rebound with
He
that
got a few offensive
lineup.
rebounds,
Yes,
but he wasn't
especially in
converting
the
the
first half
putbacks.
of that game. Especially in the first half of that game,
Yeah.
because he was basically making up for the weird offensive spacing that was happening whenever
Yeah.
the two guys were on the floor. But watching it the first half of that game and seeing, okay, they're still winning these minutes, but I saw how it was happening, and I'm like, this isn't going to hold. But yeah, I just felt like it wasn't putting those guys in the best position to succeed. But it was a valiant effort, really, from everybody. I thought Jokic was pretty good in that game, by Jokic standards. I don't think it was his strongest game, if I'm being honest, but it also wasn't his worst, even his worst at this tournament. Offensively, defensively, he was doing a lot. He was blowing up a lot of Team USA's actions. We talked about their difficulty guarding Steph Curry, but for the most part, they were shutting down a lot of the other stuff that Team USA wanted to go to, right? But Steph was responsible for, what was it, 36 points in that game?
Steph was saying before that game, just like overall, the sentiment of the United States team was that, they have so many players, they never know who's going to go off and who's going to take control game to game. And it was kind of
Yeah.
funny that Steph was almost in a slump, you could say.
No, he was for sure.
And then
Yeah.
Embiid, we know the whole discourse around Embiid and his fit with Team USA. Both of them had like good games versus Serbia. And Steph, it reminds you of the old, or, the KD Warriors in a way where no lead safe. He can be that X factor where, he can put points on the board really fast with his shooting. And he was. And then Embiid was doing his face up scoring and hitting mid range jumpers. Unfortunately for Jokic and Serbia, because to kind of beat USA, like as good as you can play, you do need some luck and some help, and you need USA to be making some kind of mistakes or just not hitting the shots. You need some kind of variance or something.
I think there's always a feeling of inevitability when you're watching the US play. Like I did not at one point was I like, oh, they've got it in the bag. I was like, okay, they're gonna come back. Who will close it out better?
Yeah.
That's kind of what my feeling was. The double big definitely didn't help. But it was also some other people just started like coming along for the rides. In the first quarter, it was just Steph. That was the
Yeah.
one thing. If Steph didn't go off like ballistic in the first quarter, that game's done. Because
Right.
obviously they came back from 14 points, but they only scored one field goal outside of Steph in that first quarter.
Yeah. He
So
had like
everyone else was struggling. So he just carried everyone. And then at some point KD is going to start hitting shots. He didn't do anything for 3 quarters. In the fourth quarter, he had like 4 field goals. LeBron was kind of consistent, but turned it up in the second half. And Embiid started making shots. So it's like you've got 4 MVPs on the court at the same time. Steph was already hot, and the other 3 picked it up at the same time. Serbia could have definitely done things better, but when Embiid's facing single coverage and KD's facing single coverage, because you can't help off Steph, and you have to go under screens on LeBron because you don't have anyone in the paint or whatever that can stop him. It's hard to really contain them for an entire game. And Serbia stopped shooting well. I think they went 0 for 9 in the fourth quarter. They were 50%
Yeah.
from 3 for the first 3 quarters.
Exactly. Like they were playing the shot variance game, which is kind of what you have to do. You have to like pray for
100%.
some shooting luck when you're playing Team USA, and they leaned right into that for most of this game, and I thought that was the right strategy because they were at an overall talent disadvantage and it was working, except that I thought they were allowing too many threes for Team USA. Like guarding Steph is tough. And you're not going to be able to stop him from taking. It's hard to run him off the line too, right? Because he's so good at that like pump fake and sidestep, pump fake and step back.
France
That even when you're
knows all too much.
trying to force him off of the third,
Yeah.
off the 3-point line, like he's still going to get his attempts up. But I thought that there was, especially with the fact that they played them in exhibition play, they played them in group play, the game plan for Steph, whatever they were trying to do, just never worked to get him out of his rhythm, because we talked about Steph being in a shooting slump, but he cooked Serbia in all three of those meetings, right?
Yeah,
Despite slumping versus all the other
every
teams. And I
other
think
team.
part of it is how it's like I love Alexa, but that was not his matchup. And we talked about that. Like, it's different. Alexa can study all the film that he wants, guarding Steph Curry on the court when you don't do it on a night to night basis or a regular basis, because he's not in the NBA. It's just a completely different kind of task. So
Cooked.
Jokic did miss a lot of threes in that game versus Team USA in particular, but he's been missing threes all tournament. What are your thoughts about how important it is for Jokic to be able to take and make threes at a high level for his overall impact?
I would say 100% playoffs. Regular season, he could take no threes. I wouldn't be concerned. He'd still dominate. But in the playoffs, when the bigs become better consistently, you're playing against the best bigs every single time. That's how you get the advantage over the ADs or the Embiids. Obviously, he's not facing Embiid ever in the playoffs, but the ADs, the Bams, the Goberts, you take them out, and then it's not just hitting the shots, but it's the fact that then Jokic is underrated at putting the ball on the floor. So, but if they're just sagging off, obviously he can't put the ball on the floor and blow by them. So he gets that three, and it just opens up the floor, opens up the pick and pop game, and it's a good kind of counter for when they're doubling him in the post. That's what we saw in Game 7, where they just kept doubling him in the post. So he tried to like kind of get out to the 3-point line, pick and pop, and he just wasn't making any shots. So like obviously, if he could, he'd take 100 layups a game. But at some point, they're just going to send bodies to him, and if no one else is making shots, then he has to hit the threes. And so I think it's the playoffs. Regular season, I don't think it'll have any effect. Although obviously he has to hit them to build that confidence throughout the year. But the
Right.
playoffs is when and like you saw that in this game as well, where it's a playoff like game. They needed him to hit a few of them. In fairness to him, like 3 of them were heaves that he just got thrown to, like end of the shot clock.
Mm.
But the
Yeah, I
ones
wanted
he
to go
should
back
have
and check that, but I wasn't sure because he was 0 of 6 from 3 in that
All
game.
right, we don't have to make end of shot clock excuses for the jumper. It's looking pretty broke.
made. No, it is
Yeah.
broke. I'll just give it a little. We'll push that down to like 50% field goal.
Yeah.
I do think that, like, in this game it was a little bit different because he was playing pretty dominantly and on the inside until he had to play in the double big
Mm.
look on the court, because that was the only time that he was spacing out to the 3-point line. There was one pick and pop three that he did attempt after Milutinov was off the floor and they were just trying to get back into the game, but I don't think that it's necessary to maximize his overall offensive impact. Like you said, yeah, if no one else is hitting shots, then he has to be able to. But then it's like, well, if no one else is hitting shots, then you're probably in a pretty dire
Yeah.
situation. I do think that, like, if he could have hit a couple threes in that game, like, they would have won. But I'm also just wary of the times, especially that we saw last season, where he would get stubborn about the three and
Mm.
his shot's just not there that night, and he's just deciding to take 6 or 7 threes for no reason and then bricking everything at the expense of what could be better offense for him and for the others around him.
I totally agree with what you're saying, Wes. And I remember in the championship run, he did the pump fake a lot, where he,
Mm.
would, attack closeouts essentially because people were really worried about his three. And I think people are more used to that. Like they're not biting on the pump fake as much. And he is really good at putting the ball on the floor. But I do agree with you too, Grace. You're not alone in this. Like he can see, Jokic is never going to be a 0 if he can't shoot a 3. You know what I mean? And
No.
like he's still like so impactful without it. But there is just something that's so backbreaking when Jokic hits a 3 because he's doing everything else and
Yes,
then he just
that's
hits the
true.
3 and it's just so demoralizing. And if you
It's
hit
like an
one of those,
AG3, but like worse, but maybe
yeah,
not. I don't know. I don't know what's more backbreaking. We should ask the audience. What is more backbreaking, a Jokic 3 or an AG3? I think AG3s are more backbreaking, to be
I'd say so.
honest.
From the
But
corner as well, it feels like it's just there's something about him hitting it from the corner where it's like
yeah,
it looks whack, where he's just kind of like
yeah.
it just goes in sometimes. I think it'd be more backbreaking, yeah.
Yeah, and then obviously Serbia won the bronze today, and we were all excited
yeah,
about that.
Wes, what did you think about, how Serbia was really able to shut them down today?
Yeah, I agree. I was surprised because even going back to the World Cup, which was just a year ago, they were the team that won it, obviously. It's pretty much the same team. You still got the same NBA players, same role players. Yeah, it was. I think Franz Wagner was probably the most surprising that he struggled so much because they were not playing anyone that was physically equipped to stop him. There was no one 6'10" to guard Franz, so you thought he would have been able to dominate. His brother actually was the one that was really the only guy who stepped up for Germany. Although you have to give credit to Serbia, they played really well. Yeah, their offensive execution was great pretty much the entire game. I think they were doing well there. And it was just that consistency. Whereas you had on the other side of the floor, they were relying on too many guys that aren't offensive threats. When Franz doesn't have it going, you were relying on Franz's jump shot. Bonga, who actually hit a couple of threes. The second German big, I forget his name.
Voigtmann.
Yeah, that's the one.
Voigtmann, yeah.
Yeah, so they were relying on that a bit too much without the consistent flow of offense that Serbia had with those pick and rolls. Yeah.
I do think that you're right about the flow of Germany's offense seemed to just completely be cut off as long as you could bother Dennis Schroeder enough. And for as many struggles as Alexei Abramovich had guarding Steph Curry, he was really good at really just slowing Dennis down from getting inside the paint and then forcing Dennis to give up the ball and making somebody else kind of initiate the offense. And then from there, everything else just sort of fell apart.
I was thinking, because you've compared Abramovich to Jalen Suggs.
Yeah, that's right.
And I was like, he is kind of similar to Schroeder too, where his defense might be a little better, or a lot better. I don't know where Schroeder's defense is these days, but he used to be like, a bulldog, relentless, endless engine type of player, hustle player, where you love him when he's on your team and hate him when you have to play against him. They had 6 players, I think, in double figures points wise on Serbia in that game today, which was really cool that it was just a total team win. Everyone kind of had a moment, like hitting a weak side 3 or finishing in the lane, Jokic backed down Tice from the 3-point line. Like, Tice just had nothing for him.
Played him off the floor.
Yeah.
Daniel Tice had never been more invisible on the floor than he was in this game, and he'd actually been pretty good for Germany throughout. They just felt so deflated, right? Like, most of the time, I tend to stay away from the emotions based analysis of the game, but that's really how it felt watching this version of Team Germany. It felt like ever since cutting off Schroeder as the head of that snake had a much more outsized impact on the whole team than I expected. And Franz, he did struggle with his jump shot, and he basically had to be the number 1 option in this game because of how difficult Serbia was making it for Dennis. But if he never develops a consistent jump shot, where does he project as an offensive option? He's a really good playmaker. I love the reads that he makes, and he's so crafty in the paint. But in terms of his scoring efficiency, at some point, you just need to be better.
Yeah, I would say, he will have to get some kind of a jumper for him to be worth the 40 million or whatever he got paid. I think at the bare minimum, he's still be a good player because he's so big. He's so good at getting to the rim. And that was an unusually bad game for him. There was one point he had an open layup. I don't know if you guys missed it and then missed the putback. And it was just it's not his game today.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, that's why I was so surprised. I wasn't even worried about the 3-point shot from Serbia's perspective. I thought he'd just dominate the matchups because none of them were equipped to handle him physically. There's no one 6'10" with foot speed on Serbia, or just in general, really. That's uncommon, which is why Franz is so good. I think the 3-point shot gives him a chance to be ridiculously good if he can become a consistent shooter, which he was in his first 2 years. He was shooting 35% on relatively low volume.
Right, respectable.
Yeah, he was you can't just leave him wide open. So there was that. But for some reason, this past season, the playoffs, and now it's kind of similar to Jokic. It's just, although Jokic was decent during the regular season, he's just seemed to lose confidence, or because he had a bad air ball as well. I think his first shot was an air ball that was completely off. And you're like, damn, his 3-point shot's really he's not confident in it at the moment. He'll still be a good player regardless. We saw last year, he didn't shoot well, and he still gave you 20 and 5 a game. But the 3-point shot would elevate him to that.
And he does so many other good things on the floor too, right? I think Franz is an incredibly underrated defender, and his versatility is pretty underrated too. But one of the shots that I've been sort of bothered by the inconsistency of isn't one of his jumpers, it's actually his floater, because he's able to consistently get to that spot and that range and get really good looks from there. It's one of those shots where I'm like, that's going to be open to you. So if you can get good at that, it can actually go a long way to sort of making up for mid-range jumper and the three-point shot being as broken as it is, because you're going to be able to use it as another way to attack certain types of mismatches as well.
Is there any final thoughts you want to say on Germany or Serbia?
I think maybe just a bit surprising how easily Germany got beat. Like I don't think they put up really a fight at all, considering how good they've been for over a year now in international basketball. I didn't see the France game because it was like at a crazy time, but I know they didn't play well in that game either. So it's just a bit surprising how they just kind of teetered out at the end. They played well against Greece. France was good against Greece as well in that game. So you're like, okay, this is just who he is. And then he struggled the last couple of games.
And to the audience, please remember to like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, and leave us a review. We're on all the audio platforms: Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. Share us with your friends, share us with your family, share us with your enemies, share us with your family's enemies. Follow us on Instagram now. We're posting shorts on TikTok and reels on Instagram as well, at What's in a Game NBA. We also have a new clips channel on YouTube for people that just like those quick hits. It's at What's in a Game NBA Clips on YouTube. And always remember that winning is fun and losing sucks.